Still staying on constitutional matters, but this time around we're extending it to the ongoing one happening at the National Assembly. They've been taking this around different zones of the country, asking what it is that the people want. Well, this morning we're being joined by a sitting senator, Senator Nwoko, who's representing Delta North Senatorial District. Senator Nwoko, thank you so much for joining us on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you.
I was going to ask you for your immediate reactions. I mean, right now we know that there is an ongoing process by the National Assembly, but I'm sure you're also no stranger to the news that the Patriots have been calling for a new constitution, and they've been holding a summit here in Abuja to push for that. And some of your colleagues in the Senate have been members of that particular group. What are your thoughts with this ongoing call for a new constitution and the process which is currently happening by the National Assembly, which you've also been a part of?
Well, let me say straight away that I am a member of the Senate Committee on Constitutional Amendments. So I am fully involved in what is happening across the country. We currently receiving documents and proposals from members of the public across the nation. The Senate committees on this constitutional amendment have had this process ongoing for the past few months, but the climax was just about a week ago. So apart from one, I think, a North Central zone, we have almost concluded the public sittings. And as far as I am concerned, I was in Akwa Ibom, which hosted the one for South-South. There were no issues about, there were no submissions from the Patriots. I would have expected the Patriots to be up and doing, to be able to make submissions before such public hearings. I don't know whether they did that in other zones, but there are 6 zones across the country where reports or recommendations or memos were received. But of course, I totally understand what they are talking about. Personally, I do not subscribe to the idea that we should, throw away the current constitution and create entirely a new one. It's a working document. It's a workable document, and it is a document that has been guiding what we're doing in Nigeria so far. I think that what we are doing is sufficient for now, which is looking at how we can improve on the constitution as it is. There cannot be any perfect constitution anywhere in the world. All that you can do is to propose amendments and hope that those amendments goes through so that whatever the wishes of the people are can be reflected. But I have heard the professor talking about the type of government. Incidentally, I do have a view on that. I personally feel that a presidential system of government is too expensive. It is too imperial in its implementation. It is too. It is not just something that we are mature as a nation to continue experimenting with. That's why I came up with the idea that we should have some kind of restructuring, but it should be a parliamentary system of government where everybody, you have the parliament in Abuja with some regional parliaments as well. But there are many issues that my bills seek to address. But I feel that the Patriots and other groups should work closely with senators so that we can reflect exactly what they are asking for. It is not enough just to go to public hearings and think that that will be the end of it. they need to work with the committee. There's a committee for constitutional amendment, and this is headed by the Deputy Senate President, and we are there to receive memorandums and ideas of how to make the current constitution more effective. It is not about the constitution per se. You know, the problem of Nigeria is not about the constitution. It's about the people. It's about us. How do we get things done? You know, how patriotic are we? How law-abiding are we as people? You know, how supportive governments at every level, from local government to state level to federal government, how is this supportive of the people of Nigeria?
Senator, clearly it would appear that there are areas of convergence in terms of your thinking as to what should be in our constitution and what the patriots are also thinking. You've talked about perhaps a unicameral legislature. You've spoken about restructuring. Even I've heard members of the National Assembly, some of your colleagues, you know, speak about how INEC should be the one conducting local government elections. But it would seem the area of divergence is whether we need a new constitution, because some people believe that all of the amendments we have been doing over the years, you know, seem to have taken us farther and farther away from where we should be going, and that this new constitution will involve Nigerians, because part of the criticisms against the current constitution, which we currently operate, is the fundamental flaw that they say it did not carry along the Nigerian people, that the people of Nigeria never at any time sat down to give themselves this constitution.
Well, look, UK doesn't have a written constitution, as it were. They have different acts of parliament, but everything seems to work perfectly well. So that argument is very academic as to whether we should get a new constitution. We don't need a new constitution. We certainly don't need a new constitution. What we have was put together by Nigerians. It wasn't put together by some foreigners. Whether they were elected or nominated or appointed, it makes no difference. They are Nigerians who are patriotic, who want to see things work for the generality of Nigerians. So the basic point here for me is that amendments are sufficient.
Senator, may I ask, you know, for those who say that we don't need a new constitution, I mean, considering how long this call for a new constitution has been on for, would it hurt for us to just have one so that at least we can pacify, and then whatever it is everybody believes working in this one can be put in the new one?
I don't know how feasible that is. It is not going to be easy to have a National Assembly and then have a different body constituted for the purposes of enacting a new constitution. I mean, we are elected by the people across the country, and so if there's going to be any sort thing, that can be addressed by those elected as senators and as House of Rep members. So we are properly equipped if that were to be the direction that we need to go. But I know, as a matter of fact, I know from my experiences, you know, my exposure and all that, but that is not our problem. You know, we're just not doing what we should do. Nigerians are not law-abiding generally. The governments are not so. Let me talk about federal government, for example. Federal government has not been supported by the states across the country. You know, if I were to, you know, decide, I would say that you know, we should have regional governments, yes, but with deputy prime ministers in those regions, six deputy prime ministers, as I have proposed in my bill. But look, we are still going to be Nigerians. So what do we do? How do we?
You said something remarkable. You said it's not going to be easy to have a new constitution. Would you say that that has been the hurdle, the main hurdle, the difficulty that it will pose to actually come up with a new constitution? Has that been the reason we've shied away from this?
No, there is really no point for it. And you know, there's no point for it because, as I said, we have a working constitution that's been there now since 1999. And things are meant to be getting better, although they are not. And I mean, you seem to just want to focus on this constitutional issue, but look, we must look at how Nigerians can be respected, how Nigerians can be provided for, how the average Nigerian can, you know, live their lives without dying of hunger, and how they can, you know, go to schools that are built for them without paying school fees, how the poor can be housed, you know, how they can receive medical attention across the country without paying for it, how they can move around effortlessly. So these are the issues, the welfare of Nigerians. How do we address the welfare of Nigeria? You know, people say, well, but look, in other major countries of the world, the average person there, you know, literally worships the government because those governments provide for them. Those governments make sure that they are protected, they are provided for, and they are respected. That's what we'll be looking at. You know, it's about our attitude, about the way we behave, how we try to manage our resources. Because we do have a lot of resources. It's just they abuse the pilfering, you know, just lack of leadership on the part of those who are entrusted with the responsibility of leading and protecting the people. Nigerians are tired of bad governance. It's not about a constitution. And this is why I think that the current president, whom I've known, I knew him back in England in those days when he was in exile. And he's always, and I know he knows what to do. He knows what to do to reorganize things, to make sure that the people are protected and that the people feel the impact of good governance.
So I want you to be able to take you up on something that you've been pushing for, the issue of Anyoma State. If you can help us to get that breakdown. The Anyoma State Creation Bill, there was a public hearing recently, and I'll get to speak on some of the drama that came out of that. Of course, we saw in the news that there were protesters who were saying that they were mobilized to come to support that hearing and that they weren't paid afterwards. I'll get you to respond to that. But then to give us an update on the push for Anyoma State and why this is necessary for you and other people like yourself who have been pushing for this state to be created.
First of all, there was nothing like those who protested. They were just some hired thugs who found their ways to the public hearings, and they didn't enter the buildings, either in Enugu or in Akwa Ibom, but they were basically sponsored by our opponents, by those who are opposed to the idea of the state creation. And they did their worst. Those who were invited to the public hearings in those states were properly provided for. There was no issue at all about anybody being disgruntled. As to why Anyoma State, look, it is the oldest agitation for a state. I didn't start it. It was started over 60 years ago, before I was born. And I grew up knowing about it. The likes of former Premier of the Western Midwestern region, Dennis Osadebe, started the whole clamor for Anyoma State. Then passed on to other leaders from Nosike to the some of Sabaden and others. So I'm just continuing from where our forefathers stopped. It is something that has always been at the forefront of every Anyama son and daughter. Nobody, I don't think there's any sound minded person of Anyama origin that would say they don't want Anyama state. No. The issue now for those who are neither here nor there is as to whether it should be zoned to southeast or south-south. But I have an answer for that. We've not come to that point yet of whether it should be zoned to south-south or southeast. We will get to that point, particularly at the point of referendum, which should happen after the third reading. As to whether we need a state, yes, we do. We are Igbos. Generally, we are Igbos. I'm sure you know that a lot of Igbos are also not happy that they are the only major groups in Nigeria with only 5 states. All the other zones have 6, with the exception of one, Northwest that has 7. Why not? The Igbos have been clamoring for one additional state to make their own 6. According to Ohanese Constitution, there are 7 Igbo states, but in reality, there are only 5. And those 5 are the southeast states. What Ohanese sees Anyama, that's the area that I represent, as a state. They also see Ikwere, which is part of River State, as a state. So if you check the Ohanese Constitution, there are 7 Igbo states. So what we want is to be that equity state, that state that will be chosen to make up that one additional state for Southeast. And so at the end of the day, whether it remains in Southeast or South-South, it's left for the people to decide.
But you've made a stand, Senator, because listening to you right now, that you've made a stand. You want Anyama to be in the Southeast, based on what I'm hearing you say. And you're absolutely correct. In that Ohanese constitution, Ikwere is considered a state in the Southeast, as is Anyama as well. But I want to be able to talk about state creation generally. And it's a recurring conversation where we always want, everybody wants their own state. And the reason why they want that state is because they feel like governance would be more accessible to them if they were an entity like a state that would be, seen and catered to, So it's a drive that a lot of people want. However, the existing structures that we have, do we not run a risk at some point of repeating the same problem? And let me explain what I mean. If we have a state, a new state, how do we know that the actual problems in that place will not persist if implementation at subnational levels are not, geared up by the people who are in charge of these areas? Is that something you would like to speak to?
Of course, you're talking about bad governance.
Yes.
Essentially bad governance. So you can create 100 states. But if the governors or those who are in charge are not responsible, they're not doing those things that they should do to protect the people there, it will come to almost something where we are. That is what you're saying. I agree with you entirely. But the quest for Anyama State is entirely a different story. As you acknowledge, there's need for one state for Ndibo. And there is also the fact that it's a historical quest for us to identify with our kids and kin across the Niger. But let me say this. Yes, there might be a deluge of clamor for states across the country. But as a member of the Committee on State Creation, I know, as a matter of fact, that if only one state was created in Nigeria, it will be Anyama State, for the reason that I've not told you. But it will not be for me to decide alone. It will be for Southeasterners, Ndibo, generally, the governors, the senators, the House of Assembly members, the House of Rep members. They must decide which state to choose to make up that 6th state for Ndibo. Either way, let's put it this way. whether we are in South or Southeast, will be known as an individual state, as I said, because of the Constitution. But the clamor for state creation will go on. It's a free world. Anybody is free to ask for a state of their own. But we, as a region, that is the Delta North, where I represent the 9 local government areas, these are people that have long clamored for a state, and they have everything that will make it work well. Out of the 9 local government areas, 7 of them are oil and gas producing. And of course, there are many, you probably know that such many banks in Nigeria are owned by people from that area. So we're involved in a lot of businesses that are known nationally. Many Nigerians have been to Delta, so they know the lifestyle of our people. We have all that it takes to make a good state. Currently, Delta State as a state earns more than any other state from federal allocation, and that is likely because of the oil and gas in the territorial district. Of course, there's so much oil and gas in other territorial districts in Delta as well, that is South and Central. But of course, I'm here to talk about my own, and we have what it takes to sustain a state. Maybe you don't know this, but the fact remains that the monthly allocation, monthly federal allocation that goes to Delta State is a bit almost the same as what goes to the 5 states of Southeast. So we have.
Senator, some people will say that perhaps that's why there's been this agitation. That is because we're still doing this allocation from the federal government. That maybe perhaps when we start to look for how states will contribute to the federal purse, more states might decide to merge rather than asking to be separated. But that's away from it. Now this process is on. How soon do you think that the process for the 10th Assembly will be concluded?
Well, let me tell you, let me deal with the first thing you said about allocation. It will pay Delta State as a state, but of course, the same with Anyama, when created, more to control our resources and make a contribution to the federal purse. I know that because we have a lot of resources from that area. But in terms of time, I don't know. But at least before I'm sure that we'll be going on research pretty soon. By the time we return in September or October, the report, the constitutional amendment public hearing report would have been put together and then presented to the entire body of the Senate for third readings. And I am sure that Anyama State will be one of them. But it's a question of time. I don't know, as a matter of fact, but I know that a state will be created in the life of this 10th Assembly, 10th Senate. But I am praying and working hard to make sure that state is Anyama State.
All right, Senator, we have to thank you. We certainly will be keeping tabs on the constitutional amendment process also ongoing, and we wait to see how matters eventually develop in the National Assembly. We have to thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. Senator Ned Nwoko is a senator representing Delta North Senatorial District.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.